welcome back for part two of our conversation of the Los Angeles wildfires. I'm really excited for today's panel. I have with me our marketing coordinator and my executive assistant, Anna Sacedo, and then from our advisory board, Joe Davila, and I'm founder and creator, Danielle Busko. Our expert today is Carlo Saggese. Carlo was one of our founding advisors before he was stolen away to do some top secret work for the government. Carlo is an entrepreneur and IT executive with a background in Salesforce consulting and business transformation. He brings a wealth of experience in brand strategy, business development, and innovation, and is a key expert in technology. He has a track record of driving growth for global brands and expertise in strategic partnership. So not only do we have the good fortune of both Joe and Carlo's vast experience in technology, specifically delivering user communities, but both of them have come into this project because they were so very passionate about tackling humanitarian crises. They both really have a strong history of service in their communities. And before we dive into the discussion about the fires, Carlo, I want to go back to when I first approached you about the community service project. And I'm not sure if you remember, but I had come to you really because of your technical expertise. And on the day of that call, I found out so much more about you that was not just very exciting to me, but very interesting. You started talking to me about when you retired and like your aspirations for service and what you wanted to do. And it was really around the time of COVID. It was kind of like towards, the end of like the lockdowns and everything. And there were like some things that were going on in your community related to like how people were handling the homeless situation, homeless that were living in like RV parks and that kind of thing. And you really connected that to like the kind of things that we wanted to do with like community service. And like you were very energized and it was a really exciting conversation. And I don't know, do you want to like share a little bit about like all your thoughts about how these kinds of community service, like what we wanted to do and all of that? I loved your energy about it and I loved like your thoughts. So I'm wondering if you want to share a little bit
Sure.
now.
So if you go back to basics, if you look at a community is a grouping of people that have actually a common passion, right? So if you look back in time and if you look at, our ancestors, a long time ago, they were tribes and the tribes were a community, right? And the community did things like if you needed a house, the community will actually build you that house. So if you look back in time, we were a community and we were passionate about things. And somehow along the way, we've kind of lost that a little bit. And so sort of during COVID was really interesting. So there was a lot of people in RVs. They were staying in RVs and they had no place to park. And there was a local group here who actually provided them, some open land and actually allowed them to park there. But then what happened was really interesting is a lot of the community brought them food and brought them drinks and brought them stuff. And so it was really an outpouring of support for these people who were at that time homeless, who were living in RVs or in tents. And that actually pulled a community. And it was actually wonderful to watch that community spirit and actually thinking back on our background as tribes. I mean, if you really think about it, the power of a community is it's so more powerful than just one person. And if we combine that power, great things can happen. And so, if you look at even things like support communities that like Apple has, it's the power of the community that solves the problem. And if we can put that to work and we can put those communities to work, we can really solve all the community problems, that we have. And by sort of reaching into all sorts of resources, everyone has a resource somewhere or knows of a resource somewhere. And if we pull that all together, we can do great things. And so that's my belief in this.
And you and your wife, and Joe, you and your wife, like that's kind of part of Joe, I'm going to use the word that you like to use, magic. Like how having you guys help charter this project along has been because not only do you have that technical background and that, you both came from a strong Salesforce background and those Salesforce user communities, right? So having you guys advise and give of this, but also like those experiences of being part of your communities and giving to your communities and all of that has really been incredible. So I want to like take that step kind of back into the conversations about the fires. I'm gonna kind of lay a foundation here a little bit, and then I want to ask you guys some thoughts about using community service in that. So I recall that at almost the exact minute, the fire in the Hollywood Hills, and I'm like looking out my window like at that exact spot right now. The fire in the Hollywood Hills, they ended up, I think they started calling it the Sunset Fire, began. You texted me in our team channel, and I said, I like all I could like text back, like I don't think I even answered whatever the question was or the statement was that you said. I said, the Hollywood sign is on fire. Like that's what came out of me. It wasn't, but the fire was like right beside it. And it wasn't clear in that moment, at the time, whether it really was or wasn't. I just remember thinking after everything that this town had experienced over those past couple of days, that sign that like stands up above this town, kind of like a symbol of hope for everybody that lives here, was about to go up in flames after all the trauma of those 2 days. And I am getting emotional, like right now, going back there. And I was out on my balcony and I was filming it. And I have footage from a view that I haven't seen on any news outlet. So I'm going to have Anna post it because you can see how quickly that spread. But you can also see how quickly it was brought under control. That was the first time that the helicopters were able to get up and LAFD was able to do an aerial assault because the winds were too strong for the other ones. That was the first one that they were able to get involved. And that aerial assault by LAFD, you can actually see how quickly they brought this thing under control. But I think I've also said to you guys from my view, and I don't think you can see this in the footage that I have, it looked like there was a volcano exploding in the middle of LA. Every person who lives here in Los Angeles kind of has a different, unique experience of those days. And I recall that there was, a fire before Palisades that started, I think it was like Sunset in La Cienega. And that was like only a couple miles from here. And I was standing like 2 feet from where I'm sitting right now here. I could smell that and I could taste it. And that is how I knew to turn the news on. Now that one, Palisades started like right in the middle of that. That was brought under control very quickly. Nobody really talks about it anymore. But with the fire in the hills, I received a text from Councilwoman Yaroslavsky to tell me that I was under an evacuation warning. I knew I had to go prepare just in case, and that was nearly impossible. Trying to think about like what are those things, like if you actually have to leave, like what are those things in your home of your whole life that you're gonna like remove and take with you? And I was literally like emotionally spent. I could barely make any sound decisions. As you know, prior to this, I worked with police and fire, right? Like I worked in safety services from, my previous degree and all of that. And when I initially heard like over those days, those stories of like the firefighters who went to that first apartment and there was no water and they were allegedly just like looked at each other and gave up, my stomach hurt for them because that they knew those winds and like they knew how strong they were and they knew what was going to happen. I mean, certainly not to the degree of like what happened, but they knew that it was going to be bad and how helpless they had to feel and they had to have fear for all of those people. And then as it raged on, how awful those human beings had to feel And then hearing the stories of the people who stood on their yards with those hoses trying to like defend their homes, or like in the Malibu area, anyone that had ever lived here or has ever driven that strip, like, every one of those homes. So as you saw that on the news, you were like, I know that home. I know that home. Or the guy in Altadena who, like, all the other homes around his burnt down and he was trying to defend his, asking people to send water bottles to him. Or when they started talking about it's not just about the homes, it's like in the businesses or the schools or whatever, every person that worked there no longer had a job. Like all of those things, like it just started to become so overwhelmingly emotional and sad. And like, what do we, like, how do you do for anybody or begin to repair this situation and the emotional impact on this? You can't begin to think, what do I need to pack to take with me? That was like beyond the realm of, so I got 2 suitcases. I don't know why I limited myself to that and thought, okay, I need the docs and the meds because they've been saying that. But beyond that, what do I take? Like I put the dog's ashes in there, some things of my grandmother's, and thought, if they tell me I have to go, I'll throw in some clothes and go out the door. Fortunately, I was 4 blocks outside. Along with my footage of the Sunset Fire, I did get some other footage that I haven't seen. I think I've talked to you guys about like this cloud of smoke that like laid over the city that like it looked like the evil lord of the underworld from like the Marvel comics was going to descend upon us and we needed Iron Man or LAFD to come and like, defend the city. And one, you can also see like the Altadena fire burning in the background. So I'll give those to Anna as well. But like, I say all this to like set the stage again, like every person has like a different experience of all of this. And like every person can contribute because of that unique experience through something like a community service, right? In our last discussion, we really talked a lot about how to use crowdsourcing part of community service to help engage volunteers. This time, there's a few other topics that I want to dig into, and a couple focus on technology. So I'm really interested to hear about what you guys have to say. One of the really big things that we can do with community service is to have discussions around preventions. Even though we're in the state of recovery right now, it's not too soon to start discussing prevention, as certainly another Santa Ana wind event of that magnitude would completely terrorize the city, and it's not without possibility. Something really interesting that caught my attention was a discussion around, we live in the age of technology. Why are we still fighting fires like it's 1962? And how should we be equipping cities to prevent and fight fires in this modern era? This is not a topic that I know about, nor did I really get a chance to hear enough about this. But I'm interested in, is there a smarter way to move forward in prevention and fight? We had to bring human resources from all over this country, plus even Mexico here to help us. Are there ways to use technology to be smarter in preventing and fighting that will put less lives at risk and protect the heroes? And then I'd also love to hear, like, you guys are so brilliant on your thoughts on that topic and how a platform like community service could activate and bring together the right resources to identify and even collaborate around expediting the necessary innovative prevention resources to keep communities safe. So I've just talked a lot. I'm giving it to you.
Let me acknowledge that what you just described and how you described it reminds us all that in that moment and the days and now weeks after, that's a really emotional thing. And you went through a lot, you and your neighbors and that whole community, a big section of Southern California went through that together. So we can't lose sight of the fact that this is a very human trauma. It's a very human occurrence. And these happen a lot in different forms, whether it's a hurricane or a pandemic or a lot of different forms of it. And when I think about going right back to that day when we were texting each other, communicating, you had a perspective that was right there in the moment. I had the benefit of a perspective that is far removed. I'm in Seattle, 2 states away, but I'm getting probably information in a manner that you're not getting there. When your house is on fire, you don't know if everybody's house is on fire or if it's just one section of your house or it's everything. That's the whole building. Those of us on the outside are getting news from a lot of different sources. Some from, I could stream your local news, plus other sources that had eyes and visibility in a way that you probably didn't in that moment. And even if you did, you might not have been able to be tuned into all of it because you're also focused on your pup and yourself and what am I going to pack and how close is it and a lot of other things that aren't like me or Carlo watching from afar. And the reason why I say that is because what if in the aftermath of this, we had a blueprint for what happened and the best of all ways that it was triaged, the best of all things that came of that, both in the moment when it was happening, in the short aftermath after, and the long term. And as we're going along in that moment, you had boots on the ground, close up visibility to know how bad it was, and at least have a sense that the Hollywood sign is on fire. It might have been. Whereas I had a bunch of other different sources of information that was telling me, well, it didn't, but it was close. The combination of those are really important. So if there was some way that we could combine all sources of information, crowdsourcing that will give us at least a part of the blueprint to understand where are we getting the best information from? And in future, where will we be getting the best types of information so we could collaborate, triangulate, crowdsource that, and have the best 360 view of that. And I think the same goes for how you treat the aftermath and how to support people in the best manner. And I think that it also takes the community's voice. Other fires that we've seen throughout California or others, how did they deal with that? And what was the best way to support people in that really traumatic? So I just wanted to be able to say that there's something to be learned for the different perspectives that we both had in that moment. And I think if we had a platform that could aggregate all of that and help us to create a blueprint that will have a lasting impact, that will remain as something that people can turn to as a good reference. And the best outcomes of that, the best approaches, the best solutions will bubble their way to the top so that we've got kind of a best of list. That's one way to be able to use technology and our multiple perspectives.
I agree with that. And I think that there was a lot of because I was here and I had people across the country and, I wasn't in immediate danger for this. So I was able to filter, those things. We do want to hop back to that idea of how do we use technology in prevention, firefighting, leveraging technology resources, Carlo, you have a huge.
Yeah. So a couple of thoughts around that. One is, we had, fires a few years ago and, we had to leave as well. And it's kind of interesting because, the next morning when we got back, there was ash everywhere. And you look at the ash and you think those are people's belongings that burnt. Those were people's papers, houses, furniture that is sitting as ash in your driveway now. And it's kind of a sobering thought when you think about that, right? So it's kind of interesting. It just burnt into ash. There was nothing left. But I think there's a couple of things that are kind of interesting. So we have drone technology now. We have AI that we didn't have in the past. We have tools at our disposal. And if you look at these fires and you look at how they spread amongst the community, there were often areas within the community that were overgrown and that were not kept, and especially around houses. And so, there's that whole notion of, maybe we could use satellite imagery or some drone imagery and run some AI and go, hey, Mr. Homeowner, you should clear a 10-foot path around your fence area and keep it clean. And there's some fire-proof plants that you can use, and there's some things you can use as well. But I think, coming out of this is going to be interesting as well, because I think there'll be building standards that will change, because you'll see some houses survived. They had, fireproof glass. They had, covered eaves. They had steel roofs. So I think building standards are going to have to change actually coming out of this, that we know that, Southern California is, prone to fires. And what can we do about it? We now know that turning off the power helps. So now you've got SDG&E and, California Edison and those guys turning off the power. But I think there's even some other things we could do in actually sort of monitoring the areas when there are fires or when there are winds. So then, that we knew exactly where the winds were going to be. They were forecast to be exactly down the mountain with 100 miles an hour. We knew that. And so, at that point, could you point a satellite at the area and actually look for sparks and flames and do stuff like that and actually get it early? Now, having said that, at 100, I think those embers were flying like a mile a minute. So it's really hard to contain. So I think there's things we can do using satellite imagery or drones or things like that to actually look at the area and run some fire prevention mechanisms to actually do that. And then the other thing too is at that real time of need, there's mass confusion. We had the same thing when we had to leave. Like, what do you take? Where is there a website to say you need to take your passport, you need to take your prescriptions, you need to take all your papers, those sort of things. And then something that I got out of watching the videos, on the fires was the amount of gas that was burning. So I went out and bought a gas key that I could turn off all my, gases. So that when the fire does come, that gas doesn't make it worse because, it just burns. There's just natural gas just flowing and burning. So, which, causes more problems. But I think, to Joe's point, what do we learn from these fires and how do we harness that? And how do we pull that information together and create a plan, a blueprint for if it happens, it's going to happen again. What can we do about it and how can we prevent it? And then actually looking at technology as well. Is there a better way to fight fires than just dousing it with water? Should we have some robotic firefighters or some robotic vehicles that actually go in without putting, people at danger and actually can get to the hot spots? We built tanks. Why couldn't we use a tank-like device to actually go in and get to the hot spots where we can't get to them normally? So there's other things we could do, I think, using sort of technology and a mixture of AI to actually analyze the data and, provide a blueprint for us.
And you make a great point about the building standards. There was a company who there were houses that were built in Malibu that used this company's material, and they showed that those houses were still standing because they could be heated up to whatever degree and they didn't burn and they were still there. And so, so how do we use community service to get how does this platform help harness the right, bring the right folks together into the platform? You guys are familiar with how we have this all laid out and how we want to use the aggregator, the data aggregator, and all the different things with our platform. How do we bring that all together to you're saying, using the drones and using AI and using all these different features to get the different companies that we need to come together to make it easier on them to talk, to have the data they need, the information. How can we support this conversation?
I think the ability to form a community around that, and maybe there's different communities. Maybe there's a building standards community where you invite architects and you invite builders in and you invite people who kind of are experts in the building field and go, hey, would you like to participate in this community event? We're trying to actually figure out what the best building standards are and how can we lobby the state to enforce these things and actually get these things in place so that every time we build a house, it's fireproof. That's the one thing. And think about the expenses that get saved by doing that. I mean, I don't know what this fire cost the state in terms of resources.
Right.
But think about the expenses and the return on investment if we did that correctly. The next thing is you get a group of technologists together. We have SpaceX. We have a whole bunch of people right on our doorstep and go, can we use SpaceX, technology to do a scan of the landscape and figure out where the burn areas, may have to be, where there's thick brush, where it needs to be thinned out, where there's potential for power lines to be touching other power lines. We can do stuff like that using AI and using those satellite images to actually scan it. So I think there's a lot we can do as a community if we just pull everyone together and go, look, we want to help this area and we want to prevent it from happening next time. We can learn from this whole experience, and we can also pull in the technology that we saw that worked. We saw the building standards that were adhered to with fireproof glass, with the the brick buildings with those, those sort of things that were built to be fireproof. We saw they survived. Now, the downside of that is those houses survive, but they have no services right now. So there's no water supply, there's no gas supply, there's nothing to it. So it's just that house is there, but people can't live in it. So, there's another, reason to actually get this right. And actually every new community that's built should adhere to some form of fire standard and not just slap them up together and, turn a profit on it.
And one of the big. Oh, sorry, Joe. I want you to, finish your thought.
Oh, I was going to say, one of the challenges of answering the question, we may be able to solve problems, or we may be able to provide a forum, a platform to bring those various communities together to solve a problem, at least from one angle. But the question is then, who owns that? Who owns the execution of that? And so who owns rebuilding LA? A lot of people. Yep. And in the end, I think one of the challenges for our elected officials who own responsibility for caring about all the issues, they may not be well informed on all the issues. They may be coming in as an expert in whatever their background is, and they have advisors. Wouldn't it be great to be able to have a platform like this where part of the community can go deep into the building standards, part of the community could go deep in the environmental side of things, clearing certain areas, doing the topographical imagery and understanding the environment and what kind of brush or cleanup or whatever, clearing of land that needs to happen to be able to protect the community. And in the end, you may have 5 different aspects of the solution. And then the question that needs to be asked is, who's going to own this, the remediation,
the execution?
And they have to have some way to be able to do a cost benefit analysis, because there is budget to do one or a handful of those things. So crowdsourcing the best of those and giving a platform that says, okay, well, here's the best of that, and let's do a cost benefit analysis based on the best of what we have. That would at least give elected officials some guidance on an intelligent path forward.
But even being able to reach out to budgeting experts, and we have through the platform a resource request workflow that could be used to get proposals for them from people who are willing to help them, right? To provide these services, or even people who are willing to say, I will do this in your community for free. And these things can be duplicated across the country. Like certain people who have a heart for Los Angeles can say, I will step up in Los Angeles, where this can then be duplicated. And being able to duplicate it over and over and over again, people can find ways to bring the cost down and then, return these services in other communities, and other people who have a heart for other communities can help in their communities. There's ways to make these things viable.
Yeah. And I think what was interesting is, if you watch the Grammys, they raised, I think, $10 million live, during the Grammys. From the viewers. And what was interesting about it is the average donation was between $5 and $10. So think about that. Think about that for a moment. Think about people's willingness to give and to help and to do that. And imagine extending this platform out to specialists or people that have skills that can give their time to help this out and to prevent further fires and actually look at it. I mean, we can't look backwards and go, well, we had a fire, how do we prevent? We got to look for the next fire. And I think that's the important thing. Like, how do we prevent it? And how do we not have this fire disaster just ripping through everything and we just rebuild it again, and we rebuild it to the old building standards, and we use the same bad habits that we have. And we, I think using technology to try to solve that, and so there's 2 elements to this. One is the power of the people. It's getting that community.
So willing. I don't mean to interrupt, but people are so willing.
Exactly.
We often underestimate people, but it isn't just in a time of crisis. people are just so willing. People have skills and talents, and they want those to be put.
But think about how I started this. Like, a community is a group of people coming together with a common interest, to solve a problem, right? So, I think if we use that as the foundation, and there's two sides to this, there's the people side, which you can't duplicate with technology, you can't duplicate with AI, and you can't duplicate it with anything. It's the power of the people combined with the technology that makes this powerful. And how do you pull that together and use those resources to bring their technology in, to bring their thought processes in, to bring their expertise in, to actually solve a problem? And these problems can be divided into different communities, but at the end of the day, we can pull that data together and actually look at it and go, this makes sense. We can actually we can lobby the state to say, these are the building standards that you will adhere to. This is the way we will make sure that there's no brush around the houses and massive. I don't know if you've seen a palm tree go up. It goes up like a candle, and it just blows up. And so looking at even the vegetation around houses, like, is it optimum? Like, how many palm trees do you have around your house that they just light up because they're higher than the house, and they just make this fire burn faster and faster? These things like that. We love palm trees, but if they're going to cause fires, in neighborhoods, then maybe we should relook at this.
Maybe I think Carlo brings up such a good point.
I'm sorry, Joe. You will hear me say on every one of these that we do, the other major important thing about this is the transparency, right? Like that.
There's no agenda. Yep.
No, there's no agenda, and everybody can see the what, the who, the how, the where everything is going, and how, like, what people are doing. And Joe, to your earlier point about, like, there's the people side of things, and like people have to be close to people. Something like this helps. Yes, technology can't always be the solve, but this is the kind of technology that can bring people closer to people, right? Like, when they're like feeling isolated and alone and not knowing what to do and can't get to their people. When I was here and nobody else was with me, that of my closest people during that time, and you guys were like all checking on me, technology had a way of bringing who I needed right here.
That transparency was exactly what I was going to build on from what Carlo said, because rightly so, this is about the power of people and bringing all of us together. It's making sure that we're tightly connected because people want to support one another. B, it's that we're making one another better informed. And the technology isn't being used just for the sake of technology. Technology is enabling better intelligence. And so when the communities are coming together and the experts on building standards or the environment or whatever that may be, when we put it out there, what their foundation of knowledge, what the basis of their recommendations and observations are, it becomes transparent for everybody to see. So if you're going to make a recommendation to take approach A in the future, there's an academic and a foundation for why that's the case.
And when we set our goal of launching our beta in early 2025, we'd really not had any idea that Los Angeles would put us to the test with an unprecedented catastrophe. We're hoping that we can use this platform to bring cutting-edge solutions and resources to alleviate suffering and devastation of the victims of the fires. And we very much believe that everyone's voice can help make great change. Please join us in sharing your bold ideas for making great change possible now through the community service platform. As we close, we'd like to extend a special acknowledgement to all of the frontline heroes, safety service workers, and LAFD, where I went to LAFD.org and supported them myself. Hope you all will as well. Who've been tirelessly and selflessly working for the communities impacted by this disaster. I really want to thank Joe, of course, who is, continuing to support us, and Carlo today for coming back and, supporting us again with all of your wonderful ideas here. Thank you.
Thank you.